Hi. Have you ever created a very simple formula in Google Sheets and found that by using only math operators that simple formula has all of a sudden become kind of cumbersome and very complicated? Well, there is an answer to that, and that is called functions. Now, functions are simply already created math where you kind of fill in the blanks. So what we're going to do today is look at that answer to more complicated simple formulas by using functions in Sheets. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the consumer technology specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's look at an example of when functions can be really helpful. As we look at this first example, which is a shopping list, we can see that we have a lot of numbers in column B, and we might decide that this is something that we want to add and get a total here in B15. And as I look at it, I see, oh, well, this was like page 1 of a local grocery store's sale list. And while this may not be exactly the totals for salmon fillets and steak, maybe that's a little low because that's just for 1 pound. Maybe I want 1.5 pounds. But it gives me an approximate idea of what I want to count on when I go to the grocery store and what I'm going to spend. So I might decide that I want to put in a formula. Now, using a simple formula, I would say, okay, that would be equals B2 plus B3 plus B4 plus B5 plus B6 plus down through B14, where B plus B14 to get my answer here in B15. But you can see how that is kind of cumbersome. It would be very easy to set yourself up for some errors along the way, whether you're mistyping or misclicking or simply missing a cell as you go through that long list. And really, this isn't as long as, say, a 50 row column or a 250 row column where you have a number through each one of those cells. Well, that would just get way too complicated, even though the idea behind it is relatively simple. So the way we fix this is that we start using functions. Now, as I look at our toolbar here in Sheets, the far right button looks like a Greek sigma. When I rest my mouse on it, it says functions. Well, when I click on it, the very first function here is sum, and sum simply means that we're going to add several numbers together to get a total. And it's, I guess, pretty obvious that if sum is first, just like that addition key on your 10 key pad, addition is something that a lot of people do very regularly. Well, if you are in a slightly different place in Sheets and you decide to use the menu bar instead, what you might do is come up to the fourth choice here in Insert, and more than halfway down, you again have function with that Greek sigma or funny E, and you get the same list of possibilities, the very first one being sum. Well, let me click where we want to put our answer, which is in B15. I'm going to go back, I guess, to the toolbar and click on sum. And as I look at this function, we notice that it has a particular format to it, and all functions will have a very similar kind of look to them. Now let's look at those guidelines or maybe even rules when it comes to Sheets functions a little more formally. And at the top you can see the format that all of the functions will use. They will definitely begin with an equals sign, just like formulas do. And then you use the math expression. So for example, we know that sum is used when you want to use addition and you want to get a total. And sometimes that is a little difficult to figure out, and so we will look at some of the ways you might be able to determine what that math expression is in just a little bit. To the right of the function, you have, of course, the argument that is within parentheses. Now, one of the really hard and fast suggestions is to use cell references when possible. Just keep in mind that if you type a literal number within a function or a formula, that then if you change that number someplace else in the spreadsheet, you have to remember to also change the formula. That can just lead to headaches and inaccurate information within your spreadsheet. So whenever possible, be sure to use cell references. Now the no spaces, again, Sheets isn't quite as particular about spaces as Excel is. But if you're going to transfer a spreadsheet from Sheets to Excel, this will prevent Excel from computing correctly. And because you have this kind of quirky circumstance and spaces aren't required or needed, then why take up the time to put in spaces? Just type your function, your formula with no spaces, and then there are no problems. Now let's come back to this example and finish the function, because we have equals sum and then we have empty parentheses. So I'm going to click back inside those parentheses, and there are a couple of things that I could do. One is that I could type the cell references that I want to go with between those parentheses, or I can simply click and drag over all of those numbers. So the longer the column is of numbers, the more chance you have of probably just typing in the first cell reference, in this case B2, then putting in a colon, and then typing in the last cell that you want to add in this case B14. The colon means, yes, include everything in between as well. So as we look at this, we have B2 colon B14, and then we can press enter to get the answer that we want. I've shifted to a new example, which is just a copy of our original. And let's go back to that functions button and click, because we do want to look at it in a little more detail. First of all, we have 5 functions at the top, which tend to be the top 5 most used functions just with everyone who uses spreadsheets. You might want to add a column or row, you might want to average numbers together, you might want to get a count of numbers within, again, a column or a row, you might want to find the largest number or the smallest number, and that is all possible. Now below that, we have essentially categories of these functions. The first one being all, and as soon as I rested my mouse on all, you can see that now over on the left, I have an alphabetical list of all of the different functions. And let me go back here. As I rest my mouse on, say, one of those offerings, and it just happens to be on and, you can see that it's logical and operator. Or let's look at the first one here, ABS, which is the absolute value of a number. So it gives you a small definition of what that function will do for you as you go through that list. It's just that it's a really long list. So below all, if you know that you want to create an array, and that's kind of an advanced feature, or database, which is nice. It does basic math, but it keeps things filtered locally, so it does a couple of things for you. You have a date category, or let's see, there's a filter category, which is sort and filter. So depending on what you need, that would be probably pretty helpful. Math would be just the more simple kind of math, although it goes into advanced math as well. Definitely beyond the math that I probably know. And then it has all sorts of other categories. Now let me go back over to the menu bar, because we want to look at that too, just to kind of compare. And again, that's the 4th choice here in the menu bar, insert, and we'll come down more than halfway to function. And again, yes, we have all of those same choices. Now let me scroll down, because occasionally, if you're not sure what the category is and you know you're not looking for one of those top 5 functions, then what do you do? Well, you can click on Learn More. So let's click on Learn More. And here it gives you a Google Sheets function list. And again, this is an alphabetical list, but it just gives you a whole lot more information. So it gives you kind of the full name if it's somewhat abbreviated as the function. And then here is the syntax. In other words, what is the pattern that you need to follow? Do you need to add in commas? Do you need to, add in brackets? Whatever it is to make that function work. And then to the right of that, it gives you a description of what that particular function does. So this is a nice reference page for you to go. Now, if I go to filter with a few keywords, I could click here and maybe type add. And as I type the word add, then it shows me that here is the type of function that it has found, and then it gives me the name of that particular function, and again the syntax and a description of what that particular function does. Now as you scroll down, and especially if you are familiar with, say, Excel, you may find that there are some unsupported functions. So Sheets doesn't necessarily have all of the functions that Excel has. So we could click on this link for unsupported functions, and it lets you know what the functions are that you may have used in other spreadsheets that for whatever reason, and sometimes it has to do with the fact that we're looking at something that is web-based. Maybe it's just how Sheets works with the rest of the Google suite, but for whatever reason, these particular functions aren't available within Sheets. Now also, it also gives you some other information about how to create formulas using functions. So a very helpful way to get to the answer that you need. Now let's look at just basic math and some of the ways you can come up with answers using some of the more common functions. So here in this sheet, in B1, I just put the value 15, and in D1 I put the value 5, and in F1 I put the value 7. So what I can do here in C3 is not use the plus math operator, but I can actually use the add function. This time though, instead of trying to go through a list, I'm going to type equals and add. And as I type add, notice that it starts bringing up that function, and it tells me, well, that's a sum of two numbers. Okay, well, that's great. Now I know that my pattern is that I need to put in a left paren. And when I do that, you'll see that I have a little question mark over here at the left. So if I click on that little question mark, or actually it says I can press the F1 key, either way, it brings up information about what I am trying to do, and it gives me a great reminder about the syntax. So if I do add, I want to put in the number, comma, and then another number. Well, I'm just going to put, say, B1, comma, and then D1. And then if I have a left paren, I always need a matching right paren, so I'll put that in and press enter. And now I have the correct answer of 20 using add. Now you can see that add shows up in the formula bar, where the answer then is just in the cell. Well, that's addition, but only two numbers. So if I need to use more than two numbers, or maybe I want to sort of be kind of creative in how I use these functions, I could also use sum. So again, let me click in now C5, and I'll type equals sum, and again I get this drop down list. So it's a sum of a series of numbers or cells, but we'll just put in the left paren. And because I pressed F1, I'm still getting this drop down of a lot more information. Now, to turn off this little drop down box, you can press Shift F1 and that turns it off. I kind of like it on though. So again, I think I'll do B1. And then I'm going to use a comma, which means I'm not going to go from B1, say, to F1 and add everything in between. I'm only going to add B1, and then let's come over to F1 and click on it. It's also color-coded, so a lot of assistance along the way. And then we need to put in our right parenthesis and press Enter. And so now we have a total of 22. Let's also then go to C7, where maybe I want to add in a range of numbers, and this time I'm definitely going to use sum. So we'll use equals sum left paren, and instead of typing in, say, B1 colon F1, I'm just going to click and drag over B1, over to F1, and all of the cells in between, and it fills in that formula for me, which is very nice, and then I'll press Enter, and I get the answer to my addition problem. While you may decide that you want to just use the minus sign on your keyboard to subtract, you might also decide for a particular reason that you want to use a function instead. And that function where you subtract one number from another number is minus. So I'm going to type equals minus, and it says it's the difference of two numbers. It's funny that we don't have a difference function, but we do have minus. Now again, I will put in my left parenthesis and I get a great example and information about minus, but again it shows me that I'm just going to put in a number, a comma, and another number. So I'm going to put B1 comma and then click on D1. And then I want to, of course, finish that out. By the way, if you forget the right parenthesis and you only have one on the left, that's not too bad. But sometimes more complicated functions are going to have, say, 3 to 5 parentheses on the left, and you have to have that same number on the right. Well, in this case, we will just press Enter, and now we've been able to subtract using a function. Multiplication is very similar to the same idea of addition, so you're going to see a lot of similarities as we multiply numbers as well. So you might decide that, you know what, I cannot remember what the answer to multiplication is, which is product, but you can remember, relatively easy, multiply. So let's type right here in C3 equals multiply, and again this is a product of two numbers, and I get all sorts of information. And let's in fact look at learn more here for just a second. Let's come down to that link and click learn more. And now it brings up help, and it gives me some of the same information that's in that little drop down, but it also really explains in more depth what I might be interested in, and it says, well, you know, see also. So if this isn't quite working the way you would like for it to, then you can always look at these examples and see where maybe you're making a mistake as well. So this learn more can be really great tools for you. Well, let me close out of that because we want to multiply. And in this case, we're just going to multiply, let's see, D1, comma, and then I'll click on F1 in the parenthesis and press Enter. Now I can also do the same thing saying equals product, because product is the answer to a multiplication problem. It's just that with product, I could multiply a series of numbers, not necessarily just two. So let's see, we could do a product. Let's say again, D1, comma, and F1. We should get the same answer. Yes, we did. Now what happens if I want to multiply say a row of numbers. Well, I definitely use product there, so equals product, left parens, and this time I'm going to click and drag over B1 through F1, end my function here with a right paren, and press enter. And now I very easily have that multiplication answer. Well, let me also then switch over to divide, because this is sort of interesting. And first of all, I'm just going to start with regular division, just using a math operator so we can kind of get an answer. Let's type equals, and let's see, that would be 15 divided by 7. And when I press enter, I get 2 to the left of the decimal place, and then, wow, a bunch of decimals to the right. And I can also use divide to divide those two numbers. So this looks a little different. I'm going to start with equals divide. And so it's one number divided by another. That's a big help. Put in my left paren. Now I'll put in B1 and a comma. And again, if I'm at all leery about what I'm doing, then I can always look at my explanation down below, and then D1 and in the right parenthesis, and I have my answer. Now, what is interesting about division is sometimes you don't want the decimal remainder, you only want the integer, the whole number, the number to the left of the decimal place. In that case, you're going to use what is, well, when I learned math, it is the answer to division, which is quotient. So equals quotient, left parenthesis. This time we'll put in our 15, our B1, comma, D1 in the parenthesis, and when I press enter, it only gives the 2. And again, when we look at the formula bar, it just says quotient. So when you look at a quotient function, you know that that is just the integer, not anything to do with the decimal to the right. Now, occasionally you want the opposite of that. You want to know what the remainder is, what the decimal is, and not what the whole number is. Probably the best example I can give is I've used logic where we needed to find odd and even numbers. So if I have a number and I divide by 2, I should get no remainder if it's even. If I get a remainder, then I know that it is odd. So let's see how that would look. We'll say equals, this time it's mod, M-O-D. And I'll put in my left paren, and we'll take B1, comma, D1, the right paren, press enter, and we get a remainder of 1. Now that's interesting, but you can kind of do it in your head. 15 divided by 7 would be 2, and 2 times 7 is the 14. So when you subtract 15 minus 14, you get a remainder of 1, or mod. It's kind of surprising that you don't get all the rest of that, 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, but mod is the remainder that you get when you do division. So as you can see, there's a lot of versatility with functions that you don't really have with your simple math formulas, but you can do all sorts of things. You can take that simple math and add to it a function, for example. You can put 2 or 3 or 8 functions together to come up with the answer that you want. So it's just up to you and the math you need as to how you combine your simple math formula with your functions to make sheets work for you and give you the spreadsheet that you truly need. To learn even more, visit our mymcpl.org/online learning page, where you will find some really great online resources, which include Universal Class, LinkedIn Learning, and Learning Express Library. Tune in each week as we introduce new videos on a variety of tech topics. You can find us at 1 o'clock on Wednesday and Friday, and 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Be sure to find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, or if you prefer, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at MCPLMO, where you can find our MCPL Consumer Technology Resources playlist.